Whipple Family Misadventures Book 11 Between the Light and the Darkness Chapter 8. The first thing Shadow did was went to go find his gloves and socks. After removing them like Eclipse wanted, he had hidden them in the hatchery just in case. Walking around without proper protection for his hands and feet was a really bad idea. He needed to be wearing them. He remembered that Eclipse loved being in the hatchery and might have gone back there as well, but to Shadow's relief, the Darkling wasn't there. Slipping inside, he found the garments and carefully put them back on, slipping the gold rings over to secure them. He never should have listened to Eclipse. Taking a deep breath to steady himself, Shadow looked around. This was going to be the difficult part. Back when he had first met Eclipse while he was still on Earth, the Darkling had mentioned that it was difficult for him to physically be there, because it was so far away. While Shadow still didn't know where exactly the Black Comet was, if it was hard for Eclipse, it would have been near impossible for Shadow to warp himself back to Earth. Especially since he needed to bring his dad as well. Shadow would have to steal that Chaos Emerald for help. The very thought of doing that made him want to curl into a ball and shiver. Black Doom was terrifying when he hadn't been doing anything to get in his way. Shadow didn't want to even imagine what might happen if he was caught trying to steal from him, but it was the only way out of here. He knew that the moment he got the emerald, Doom and his army of black arms would come after him. And even if he managed to get to his dad right away and the two of them safely got away, he would need to make sure they couldn't come after them, because this wouldn't work if they escaped only to be found again right away. First, the emerald. It didn't take that long for Shadow to find the forbidden room where it was kept. The door had a code on it, and while Shadow didn't know the number sequences, he had seen Eclipse put it in. Closing his eyes, he thought about the finger movement his brother had made when he put in the code and copied it. The door opened. Exhaling in relief, Shadow dashed inside. He went right up the pedestal, lifted off the cover and gazed at the gleaming gem for a second, momentarily stunned by it. Once he had it, he then had to be sure they wouldn't follow him. And since he took their emerald, they would definitely be after him. So he needed to make sure they couldn't follow him, or more exactly destroy something so it was impossible. That plus the lack of an emerald would be enough. Hopefully, he could do that. Snatching the emerald, Shadow barely had a second to admire it and feel the rush of power before an extremely loud alarm started blaring. Looking around with horror as metal gates started to come down over the door, he would be locked in. At least until soldiers and most likely Black Doom came for him. Shadow knew he needed to practice this at least one before he tried it for real and was running out of time. Clutching the emerald in his left hand and staring into faucets, he thought about Doom's main room, where his dad was, and closed his eyes. Chaos control, he muttered, a desperate hope that this would work. Between the flash of the light, his surroundings blurred and changed into Doom's dark, creepy main control chamber. Gasping, Shadow glanced around and saw that it was empty. Doom nor his dad was here. One part that was not empty was all the glowing computer screens and maps, for all those plans that Eclipse had mentioned he was working on. An idea struck. Looking down at the emerald, Shadow thought about how he hadn't had a chance to perform Chaos Blast, at least not seriously. But the name sounded powerful. He could have just used Chap's Spear, but that wasn't strong enough to do the amount of destruction that he needed. On the far side of the chamber, there was a long hallway with a light. Peering down it, Shadow saw his dad in a cage at the end of it, a relief he was close by and yet out of harm. He was slumped against the wall, unmoving, but he was still breathing and didn't look like he was seriously harmed. Time for some destruction. Holding the emerald in his hand, Shadow closed his eyes and tried to draw upon its power to do a Chaos Blast. He felt the heavy, dense red energy start to gather around him, but it wasn't enough. He strained until he was panting, pulling as much energy as he possibly could, but when he released it, it was only a tiny shock wave that barely reached the edges of the room before it faded away. Shadow needed to make sure this would be as powerful as he possibly could make it, at minimum a lot worse than that. Outside the chamber, the alarm was still blaring. He could hear yelling, soldiers running in the corridors. It wouldn't be long until they thought to look in here. Yanking the gold rings off his wrists, Shadow tucked them under his arm so he didn't lose either and held up the emerald again. This time when he called the energy toward him, it was far more than before, thick and heavy. So much so that he felt his spine straighten, as he dragged as much power toward him as possible. When he finally released it, the action pulled him off his feet and into the air, and the red energy exploded away from him, destroying everything in its path. A true action worthy of the name Chaos Blast. Shadow did it again. He would have done it a third time, except the second blast took out 2 of the walls, leaving only rubble behind. Everything that formerly could have been used against them had been destroyed. Shadow knew that was enough. Not to mention if he kept doing it, the chance of him hurting his dad would get higher. They needed to leave. Jumping off a twisted pile of metal, Shadow ran in the direction of what used to be that hallway, relieved to see that his dad was looking around in confusion.
"Dad!"
He cried out, running toward him. Reaching toward the bars of the cage he was in, he tried to break them, but there wasn't time.
Shadow, what happened? We need to get away from those people.
His dad reached for him. Shadow stopped what he was doing to look at him.
"They're my biological dad and brother."
He wasn't ready for the look of complete and utter shock that came over Wade's face.
Are you sure?
"Yes."
His dad's expression changed to one of concern.
You don't want to stay here, do you?
Blinking, Shadow made a face in disbelief. He would have rather dealt with a massive crowd of people than stayed here, and the idea of being in a crowd made him feel nauseous.
"No? They're not my family? I want to go home with you. Right now."
Behind them, they heard a yell. Shadow turned to see Eclipse, his tail flicking wildly behind him with anger as light faded away from warping in there.
"What are you doing?"
The dark hedgehog stood as tall as he could and revealed the Chaos Emerald that he was holding.
"I'm leaving. I already have a dad and a brother. I don't need evil ones."
Snarling, Eclipse lunged toward him.
"Thanks for the lesson on chaos powers."
Holding the emerald over his head and reaching through the bars to grab his dad's arm with his other hand, Shadow kept his eyes locked onto the darkling.
"Chaos control."
He yelled as loud as he could, hoping this would work. He had never properly warped with another person before, especially so far, and yet, they had no other choice. The last thing Shadow saw before the bright flash of light swallowed up his vision was Eclipse's claws about to rake across his face. Wade was having the most terrifying and bizarre day of his life, and he didn't have the slightest clue what was going on. Although to be fair, he had thought that a couple of times ever since that government maniac had tried to blow up their town last summer. After being snatched from his home by some unknown and terrifying alien, then put through a brutal interrogation where said alien wanted him to denounce his son. All while he was only wearing pajama pants, an old t-shirt and socks, after an extremely low amount of sleep. He had held out, but if he also had a feeling whatever this alien thing was, it was furious about something and he wouldn't last much longer. And then an alarm started going off and he was tossed into a dark cell, alone. Leaning against the wall, Wade closed his eyes and tried to go through his breathing exercises so he could stay calm, trying to think through this nightmare. And then suddenly there was a series of explosions, and then Shadow was there, holding some large shining gem in his hand, and before they could talk about what was going on, how to get out of there, the hedgehog teleported both of them. As soon as his vision cleared, Wade looked around at their new unfamiliar surroundings. It looked like they were in some kind of hallway in a hospital, bare, clinical looking and extremely old, with metal plates on the floor.
What? Where are we? What did you do?
Next to him, Shadow was panting from exertion, still holding that strange red gem.
"I warped us away, using chaos control. I was trying to get back home, but..."
It's okay.
Wade said automatically, hoping he wouldn't feel bad or guilty for not getting them back home on his first try. They were away from that horrible place, and for the moment that was good enough.
Okay, I have a lot of questions. A lot. Are you alright?
When Shadow nodded, he kept talking.
How did you end up there?
Shadow stared down at the ground.
"The person who is my biological brother convinced me that I wouldn't be happy on Earth. With you and Silver, he said a lot of mean stuff, and I was really..."
Noticing that the dark hedgehog was starting to tremble, Wade frowned sympathetically and sat down on the floor. They probably should have gone about figuring out where they were, but he couldn't, not while his son was in distress. He really wanted to hug him, but he didn't know if the hedgehog wanted it or not.
"I'm sorry, Dad."
Shadow said, squeezing his eyes closed.
I'm sorry I said those things and hurt you and Silver.
I know, I accept your apology. I'm just really glad you're all right. So glad. But also, just what?
Shadow shook his head.
I left because I thought you would be happier if I wasn't there.
There was nothing worse than hearing his own son seriously thought things would be better if he was gone.
No, absolutely not. That is in no way true. I spent the entire weekend looking for you, extremely worried.
I was barely able to sleep because I thought you ran away and didn't want to be in Green Hills anymore.
Do you like Silver better than me?
The dark hedgehog mumbled, his ears flat against his head. Wade blinked.
No.
Instantly, Shadow raised his head as his eyes widened with surprise.
You like me better? I'm the favorite?
Also, no.
Wade said quickly, as that was not what he wanted to convey.
I don't have a favorite between you and your brother. I love you both equally. And for different reasons, there's stuff about you that's unique, and that's why I love you. Same with Silver.
Even though he hurt Silver.
Wade nodded, considering that.
Yeah, you did, and while that was not okay and you still need to apologize to him, you hurt his feelings more than you physically hurt him. While I might not like your behavior some of the time, I still love you so much.
Reaching out, cupping his hands under Shadow's chin.
If you know nothing else, know that I love you.
Unblinking, Shadow gazed back at him.
I know I heard everything when you were talking to him.
Wade's eyes widened.
You did? Okay.
He realized there were so many gaps in this story, and he needed a lot of information.
Why don't you start at the beginning and tell me everything?
Wade suggested, letting him go, leaning against the wall to get comfortable. While Shadow talked, Wade could not help but feel both annoyance and a touch of appreciation for how diabolical these people were. To see that Shadow already felt like an outcast, then to encourage him to misbehave, and then once he got into trouble, to say it was because he was unloved and unwanted, feeding the original feelings of not fitting in. More than just a coincidence, but also downright cruel. Just a reminder that both boys were getting a therapy appointment as soon as humanly possible.
Did they encourage you to hit Silver with a shoe?
Shadow shook his head, taking a step back to put space in between them.
No, I was just really mad that he wouldn't listen to me, and then...
He covered his face with his hands, trembling again. From where Wade was sitting, it looked like Shadow was trying so hard to get his emotions under control, trying desperately to shove them down and failing.
Hey, for the rest of this conversation, whatever you're feeling, you're allowed to express. It's just you and me here, and I'm not going to judge you or get upset. If you're mad or angry or sad, it's okay.
When Shadow only continued to tremble, Wade frantically tried to think of what could help him. Someone he had no idea who had at some point obviously told Shadow that he needed to push down and bottle up his emotions, and that was one of the biggest issues he was struggling with. Trying to choke them down until he couldn't anymore, and then had to deal with all his repressed emotions at once.
I'll start, okay? What just happened that was really scary? Whoever that alien person was, that was terrifying. And then knowing you were there alone, that was also scary. But I'm also really proud of you. You got us out of there. You did that all by yourself, and you didn't freeze up. I'm so proud. That was massive, and you did that.
Very slowly, when Shadow lowered his hands, his eyes were bright with tears. Wade held out both arms, an invitation, and the dark hedgehog moved into them immediately.
That was really awful. They made me think I wasn't wanted anymore and that I should leave to go be there with my real family, and I wanted to know so badly. But then it wasn't good, and they were mean and didn't act like a family. And then being there was worse. Terrifying.
I know.
Wade said as gently as he could, holding the trembling hedgehog against his chest.
It's been a really hard few days for you, hasn't it? But what they said was wrong. I want you and I love you, and that will never change. I might not like how you act, but I love you, and I'm very proud of you.
When there wasn't any kind of response, Wade just continued to hold him. If anyone needed love and reassurance after what had just happened, it was Shadow. After a few minutes, Wade eyed the red glowing gem that Shadow had dropped onto the floor. It had almost a mystical look and feel about it. Part of him wanted to touch it, and the other part wanted it as far away from him as possible.
What is that, and where did you get it from?
It's a Chaos Emerald. It's how I was able to warp both of us so far. I stole it from them.
Clenching his jaw, that made Wade tense, as it gave another reason why those aliens might show up again. Another thing to worry about.
Great.
I had to. I wouldn't have been able to warp both of us and to go so far without it.
Shadow said, pulling back slightly so he could look up at him. Wade sighed.
I see.
He was about to ask why Shadow was only wearing socks and didn't have his shoes on, but then remembered how he had taken them and never gotten the chance to give them back. At least they matched. Shadow sniffed and let go, sitting down on the ground next to him and sighed.
I kind of think that maybe we should have brought Eclipse with us, away from him.
Why? Didn't you say he manipulated you?
Yeah, but I think he did it because he was lonely and just wanted me there to have someone else around. And now he's got to deal with him all by himself now that we're gone.
Wade hadn't considered that, but he also hadn't met this person and was feeling more biased by the fact this person had stolen his son, manipulated him, and had uncovered a lot of issues that he didn't want to deal with now. Wade knew that he would have had very little patience for that kind of person being around his kids. Wade stood up and stretched, working out the kinks in his back.
We need to figure out where we are.
He said and started to walk and heard Shadow get up and pat after him. This air in this place was so stale, like it had been abandoned a long time ago. After the adrenaline of what had happened was wearing off, Wade felt like he was crashing, especially after very little sleep, and he had no idea if it was the same day or how long he had been with those aliens. If they could figure out where they were, and as long as it was safe to do so, he might have needed a brief nap before they moved on. Ahead of them, he saw a wall with one massive window that took up the entire span of the wall, and outside was the most incredible, eye-popping view he had ever seen. His jaw dropped, as he suddenly knew exactly where they were.